Hello everyone, welcome to part 5 of this series on AutoCAD. In this session, I'll be looking at more drawing tools in AutoCAD. I will be looking at circle, arc, rectangle, and ellipse. I will be explaining in details how to use these important drawing tools. Let's get started. In today's tutorial, we'll be looking at how to use some few drawing tools. We'll be looking at how to use circle, arc, rectangle, and polygon. All right, to use circle, there are actually two approaches. There are two approaches you can use to draw your circle. All right, so first of all, let's learn how to use circle. There are actually two approaches that you can use to draw your circle. If you go to the circle icon on your drawing panel, you will see that there is an arrow underneath the circle. Clicking on the arrow reveals a drop down where you see different methods of drawing circle. You could actually use center radius method, center diameter method, 2P 2-point method, 3-point method, tan method, and tan method. So this represents different methods of drawing your circle. Also, as an alternative, you could also decide to follow your command line. Now you can see that the command line is empty now. So to activate the command line, I'm going to click on circle. Clicking on circle activates the options for circle. Now you can see that there are different options for drawing circle on my command line. By default, you have specify center point for circle. Then as an alternative options, you have 3 points, 3P, 2P for 2 points, then tangent radius option. So I prefer following the guidance of my command line. So by default, if I would go by my default option, which says specify center point for circle, I will respond to that by clicking on my screen. So I've specified the center, my desired center point. Then looking at the command line for the next option, it says specify radius of circle. So at this point, I can decide to put any dimension that I want. Probably I'm going to put 16. I will just go ahead and type 16. Now typing 16, by default, my unit is in inches. By default, my unit is in inches. So 16, this represents 16 inches. I press enter. Now typing enter on my keyboard, means to accept my input of 16. So now I have a circle of radius 16. I'm going to be doing this again. So I click on circle on my draw panel. I look at my command line which says specify center point for circle. I respond to this by clicking on my screen for the center point of the circle. Now it's asking for the radius of the circle. So because I want to use that, I want to draw this to dimension. My unit is in inches, by the way. So because I want to draw this to dimension, I'm going to be typing maybe 30 this time. 30. Then once I type 30, I'm going to be pressing enter on my keyboard. So enter signifies uh, receive my input. So enter is a way by which I tell AutoCAD to receive my input. So I'll type enter and I'll have a circle of radius 30 inches. So this is 16 inches and this is 30 inches. If I want to draw a circle without dimension, there's a way I can also do it the same way. I click on circle, specify the center point. I can pick on my desired center point. Now, because I don't want to use dimension this time, I just want to draw it graphically. So I'm going to decide on where to stop. So at this point, I'll just click instead of putting into dimension. I will just click to draw the circle. So now I have drawn these three circles. This is 16 inches, this is 30 inches, and I've just drawn this without even knowing the dimension. So by just clicking any desired point. So this is one way by which we can draw a circle. Okay. Another way we can draw our circle is by using other options, other methods. So now I want to draw another circle using the 3P method, the 3-point method. So I'm going to click on 3P to activate the 3 points. Then I'll specify first point on circle. Okay, I pick a point on my screen, specify second point on circle. So I'm looking at the command line for instruction. specify touch point on circle. All right. So now you can see that I have three circles. I have a circle, but I have defined the 3 points on the circumference of the circle. I picked a point around here. I picked another point around here. I picked another point around here. So the 3 points I have picked are 3 points on the circumference of the circle. So this is another method of drawing circle. Okay, I'm going to be drawing circle again using a different method. So I activate my circle again. Then now this time I want to use the 2P method, which is the 2 points method. So I click on 2P to activate it, and my instruction says specify first endpoint of the circle's diameter. So I'm going to click on a point on my screen. Then I look at the command line again for the next instruction. So the command line is our guide. So doing this now, I'm going to pick another point here. So by picking these 2 points, now 2 points now instead of 3 points. Now by picking these 2 points, I've been able to define another circle. So I've drawn circle using three methods. I use the center and the radius method. I've used the 3P method. Now I'm using the 2P method. So these are different options of drawing circle. AutoCAD gives us different methods of drawing the same object. So we are the one to decide on how exactly we want it drawn. Now you must have noticed that depending on the situation that you have, some methods are suited for dimension drawings, while some methods are suited for sketches. Now my 3P method might be very good if I'm working on sketch, but if I'm working on dimension, I would rather want to use the center and the radius method. Okay, there's another method of drawing circle. So I click on circle. Then looking at another option here, I have TTR, tangent radius, which means that I want a circle that is tangent to an object at a point, tangent to another object at a point, then I must know the radius of the circle. This method is actually very good if I'm working with dimension drawings. So, but I'm still going to activate it. Now specify point on object for first tangent of circle. So I'm going to click on. So now when I try to click on a point here, you can see there's an icon, a tangency icon in green. So that icon is telling me that the point of tangency. Those points are points of tangency. So I'm going to click on any point here. Then my option on command line says specify second tangent of circle. So I'm going to be clicking on another point here. Now, the next option is specify the radius. So it has given me a suggested radius value of 35. So it means that my radius should be within, so a radius that is going to work in this case should be a radius within around 35. So now I'm going to say 38, for instance, 38, and I press enter on my keyboard, enter to accept my 38 input. Okay. Now, on my screen, I have a circle drawn, tangent to this first circle, tangent to this second circle, and of radius 38. So this is the TTR method. The next tool that I'll be looking at is how to draw an arc. How to draw an arc in AutoCAD. Now, similarly, like we have done in the circle, there's an arrow. You can see there's a drop-down arrow on that arc. Clicking on the arrow, you can see that we have different methods of drawing an arc. We have the 3 points method, we have the start center end method, start center angle method, start center length. So different methods of drawing an arc. So one good thing about AutoCAD is that AutoCAD has given us different methods of doing the same thing. So it's left for us to decide on which particular method that we would like to do. And your choice of method depends on the object. It depends on what you want to draw. So let's try and learn as much method as we can. So instead, if you don't want to use this drop-down method, you could also follow the guidance of your command line. Your command line can give you a step-by-step guide on what to do at a particular time. So I like using the command line, but if you know exactly what method you want to use, you can come here and just pick the particular method. All right. So now to activate the command line, I'm going to click on circle icon. I'm going to click on, to activate the command line, I'm going to click on arc. Now clicking on arc, you check your command line for instruction. It says specify start point of arc or center. So these are two options. You can either go for the default, specify start point of arc, or you go for the alternative, specify the center point. So I'll be going with the default, specify start point. I respond to that, by clicking on my screen. Now, if you look at the command line, you see that there are changes there. So this first change says specify second point or center or end. Okay, I'll be responding to this particular one, the default specify second point. I pick another point. Then on the command line, I have a new instruction, specify endpoint. I pick another point. Okay, so that's all for arc. Now I have been able to draw an arc by picking the first point of the arc, by picking the second point of the arc, and by picking the endpoint. The second point here represents a point, a point where you want the arc to pass through. That's what the second point represents. So the start point, the second point, and the end point. I have drawn an arc. There are other methods of drawing arc. So now let's follow another route. I click on arc again to activate it. Specify start point of arc or center. So this time I'm going to be starting with specify start point of the arc. I pick a point. Now, instead of going to specify second point, I'm going to deviate. I'll be choosing specify center this time. So I click on center. So now I'm going to specify the center of my arc. I pick another point here. Okay, so I have, if you look at the command line, I have other options. I have other options. Now, the default, it says specify endpoint of arc. Specify endpoint of arc. So now I'll be clicking the endpoint of the arc. Okay, I'll be clicking my any desired endpoint of the arc. So I'm going to click on a point here. Okay, I've been able to draw another circle by using the option first point, then center, endpoint. Unlike what we did here where we use first point, second point, endpoint, this is first point, center, endpoint. Okay, so let's draw another circle using a different method. Let's draw another arc using a different method. Specify start point of the arc. Specify center. Okay. Okay. Now you have another option of angle. Angle. So if you are going to be using the angle method, you need to specify the angle you want. So I'm going to activate the angle. Now it's telling me specify included angle. So I want an arc that is at an angle of 56. So I type 56 on my keyboard. Then when you type a number to represent a dimension on your keyboard, always remember to press enter on your keyboard to accept, to tell AutoCAD to accept your input, or you can press spacebar. So in AutoCAD, enter and spacebar, they do like the same thing. They do the same function. And the function is to receive your input. You want to tell AutoCAD to receive your input, press enter or spacebar. So I'm going to be pressing either enter or spacebar now to receive the 56. Okay, so now we have drawn a circle by specifying the start point, the center, and the end point. Start point, center, and end point. So this is another method. So you can see that we have drawn circle using 3 methods. So now those 3 methods that we have used, you can also find them here. 3P here represents start, center, end, which we have done. Then now start, center, end was what we used here. Start, center, end. Start, center, end was what we used. Then start, center, angle was also what we used here. Start, center, angle was what we used here. So if you look at it now, you can see that there are still other options. There are still other methods that you can use to draw your circle. So if you look at the command line has also given you a guide to this option. So you can either directly pick the method or follow the guidance of your command line. So these are ways of drawing an arc. Okay, now the next tool we'll be looking at is rectangle. Okay, rectangle is very easy to use in AutoCAD. So if you look at the drop down here, if you look at the tooltip that we have here, you can see that a rectangle has 4 corners. A rectangle has 4 corner points. A rectangle has 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 corners. But in AutoCAD, you want to draw a rectangle to sketch. You need to pick 2 diagonal corner points. Diagonal points. So this can be my first diagonal point, and this is going to be the second diagonal point. Diagonal, not opposite. Okay, so I'm going to click on rectangle again. So if I pick here as my first point, then this will be my second diagonal point. So to draw a rectangle in AutoCAD, you need just 2 points. If you are drawing it to sketch, you need just 2 points, and the 2 points must be diagonal points. So I click on rectangle again. If this is my first point, then diagonally, I'll move this way. You can see, you can follow the direction of my cursor. So I pick another point around here to represent my second diagonal point. Just 2 points to draw a rectangle to sketch. Okay, and let me draw a rectangle again. Rectangle. I want to pick my first diagonal point now. I'm going to pick, let me pick from here. Then diagonally, follow the direction of my cursor. So diagonally, this is my second diagonal point. So you can draw a rectangle to sketch by picking 2 points, 2 diagonal points. Please take note of the word diagonal, not opposite. You can't pick this and this. This and this are opposite points, but diagonally, this and this are diagonal points. So very important to draw a rectangle to sketch. Now, let's assume we want to draw a rectangle to dimension in AutoCAD. Okay, I click on my rectangle to activate it. Now, it's telling me specify first corner point. Okay, you pick your first corner point. I can pick anywhere. I pick a point here. Now, you want to draw it to dimension. So click on your dimension alternative option. Then it's asking for specify the length of the rectangle. Okay, I want to draw a rectangle of 35 inches. I type 35 on my keyboard and when I'm going to press enter. Don't forget I told you anytime you put an input on your keyboard, always press enter or spacebar. So I'm going to be pressing enter. Then the next instruction says specify the width of the rectangle. So the width, I'm going to be using width 45. Enter again. So now what I have here now, okay, I have my rectangle, but I'm not yet done. I'm not yet done. So now, okay, now you can see that my rectangle is not yet stable. It's not yet stable. Now to make my rectangle stable, I'm going to specify a corner point. I'm going to specify a corner point. The corner point can be in my first quadrant, in my second quadrant, in my third quadrant, or in my fourth quadrant. So depending on how I want the rectangle to be placed. So I want the rectangle to be placed in this direction. So I'm going to pick any point in this direction. Okay, by picking that point now, the rectangle has been finalized. So I have my rectangle 35 length and width of 45. Okay, let me draw it again. Rectangle again. Specify first corner point. You can pick anywhere as your first corner point. Now, the first rectangle I drew, I picked my first corner point here. That was why you could see that this point was common to the four quadrants, to the four quadrants. Now, if I pick here, I pick a point now. So this point is going to be common to the four quadrants that we are going to see later on. Now, I click on dimension. Dimension specify the length for the rectangle. This time, let me use 60. Press enter. Then specify the width 60 by 30. Press enter again. Now I have a rectangle 60 by 80. Now, okay, you'll notice that now this rectangle now is, there is this, look at this point. I want you to observe the point around here. You can see that this was the first point that we clicked, that we picked. You can see now that rectangle is common. These four rectangles are common to that first point. Yeah, that's this point is common to the four quadrants. Okay, now to finalize your rectangle, you need to specify the corner where you want your rectangle to face. So I want it to face the third quadrant. This is the first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, fourth quadrant. I want it to face this direction. So I'm going to pick any point in this direction, in this quadrant. So I pick a point here to finalize that dimensional rectangle, 60 by 30. Okay, if you look at rectangle icon, you will see there's an arrow beside it. So clicking on the arrow, you have another tool called polygon. You have another tool called polygon. All right, so now let's look at polygon. Let's look at how to draw polygon. Polygon. Okay. 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 Now, the next tool we'll be looking at is ellipse. The next tool we'll be looking at is ellipse. Ellipse. How do we draw ellipse? How do we draw ellipse in AutoCAD? Okay, I'll be deleting For now, I'll be deleting my object by pressing Ctrl A, pressing Ctrl A, and press delete. So doing that, I will delete my object. Okay, now the next option I want to look at is how to draw an ellipse. Okay, if you look at ellipse, there is an arrow beside it, and an arrow beside it that gives us three ways we can draw ellipse. We have the center method, we have the axis end method, and we have the elliptical arc method. So now when you see this arrow, you could either use these methods or you could also use the guidance of your command line. So to activate the command line, I will go ahead and click on ellipse. Clicking on the ellipse icon activates the command line. If you look at the command line, it says ellipse specify center of ellipse. Okay, so I pick a point. I respond to this option by picking a point. Specify endpoint of ellipse. So I'm going to be picking one endpoint. Actually, an ellipse has two major axes, a major axis and a minor axis. So for the major axis, there are 2 points of the endpoints of the major axis. And for the minor axis, there are also another 2 points on the minor axis. So now to draw an ellipse, using this method, you need center and a point on the major axis, another point on the minor axis. So I'm going to be picking a point here, then another point here. Okay, so now you can see now that I have an ellipse. I have specified the center of the ellipse, 1 point on the major axis, another point on the minor axis. So I'm going to try and do this again. I activate ellipse. So I follow my command line, specify center of the ellipse. I pick a point around here, around the center. Specify endpoint. So I can pick another point. This is my major axis, as you can see from this ellipse. This is the major axis. So I can pick any point on the endpoint of the major axis. I pick a point here. Then for the minor axis, this is the minor axis. This is the minor axis. So I can either pick here or here. Pick any point. So I have picked 3 points. Number one is a center point. Then number two is a point on the major axis. Number three is a point on the minor axis. So by picking these 3 points, I have been able to draw an ellipse. Okay, so there's another method of drawing an ellipse, so the method I just used here is this method. Center, a point on the major, a point on the minor. So this is the method I've used to draw this ellipse. Now I want to use this other method. Okay, but I want to use the guidance of my command line. So I activate ellipse. Now it says specify center. Okay, alright. Okay, okay. So now I want to use another method for drawing my ellipse, and the method is the axis end method. So I will have to select the method here first so that I can activate it on my command line. So I have to select that method first, axis end method. So I click on that method to activate it on my command line. And following that method by default, okay, let me pan this away. Okay, now following the method, by default, it says specify axis endpoint. Okay, all right. So this is going to be a little bit different from the method that we used previously. So for this, I will need to pick the two endpoints of one axis. The two endpoints of one axis. Now let me pick point one here, then the other point two here. So now note here, I have not picked the center point. I picked 2 points of one axis. Then I'm going to switch direction to pick another point of the other axis. So by picking these 3 points, I've been able to draw the ellipse. By picking these 3 points, so I pick the point here representing one endpoint of the axis. I pick another point here representing the other endpoint of the axis. Then I picked my third point around here representing the endpoint of the other axis. So picking three points without picking the center, I've been able to draw this ellipse. Okay, so the last tool that we'll be looking at, the last tool, Control A, delete. The last tool that I'll be looking at now is elliptical arc. Elliptical arc. elliptical arc. So to choose the elliptical arc, I'm going to select the option here to activate it on my command line. So now elliptical arc actually is an arc that is obtained from an ellipse. Elliptical arc is an arc obtained from an ellipse. Now, if you look at what I have here, this is an arc. This is not a complete ellipse. It's called elliptical arc. So it's an arc that is obtained from an ellipse. So the idea is for me to draw a full ellipse first. Then I'm going to cut out a desired portion of the full ellipse to form my elliptical arc. So I'm going to draw a full ellipse, a complete ellipse first. Then I'm going to cut out a portion of that full ellipse to have my elliptical arc. All right, so let me try and do it again. So I activate elliptical arc. I have it on my command line. It says specify axis endpoint of elliptical. So that means I'm just trying to draw that full ellipse now. Specify the other endpoint. Okay, then change direction to specify maybe your other point. Okay, so now if you look at what I have now, I have a full ellipse. I have a full ellipse. Now I need to now cut out the desired angle that I want, the desired angle. So it's good you do your cut in an anti-clockwise direction. So depending on what you want, make sure that you do your cut in an anti-clockwise direction. That anti-clockwise direction is going to give you the desired direction that you want. So if I take it from here, for instance, and I move anti-clockwise, you can see anti-clockwise gives you that desired direction. So I move anti-clockwise, then I click here to end it. So you can see now I have an elliptical arc.